Može. Good morning, and welcome back to our basically second day of the online conference on addressing the challenges posed by disinformation in the Western Balkans. To those of you who have might just joined us, I will
Fine now. Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
My name is Hanna Sokolovic. Welcome to the second day of the online conference addressing the challenges posed by disinformation in the Western Balkans. To those of you who have might just joined us today, I will remind you that the conference is organized by the Regional Cooperation Council with the support of Osservatorio Balcani Caucaso Trans-Europa, the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats, the European External Action Service, and the government of Italy. Now, what we've discussed yesterday is basically how disinformation operates in the context of hybrid threats. We got to hear the perspective of the civil society organizations in handling this information in different ways. And today we will be continuing with our final panel on the institutional perspective on disinformation in the Western Balkans. Now, our moderator today will be Ms. Samela Odobasic, who is the Director of Broadcasting and Communications Regulatory Agency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Besides this position, on behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Amela is a Vice Chair to Study Group 1 for Europe and reporter for the Study Group 1 Question 7, Access to Telecommunications, ICT Services for Persons with Disabilities and Other Persons with Specific Needs for the mandate of 2018 till to 2021. Now, Amala is a fervent advocate for promoting and protecting fundamental human rights, such as access to information and freedom of expression. We will be having our keynote speaker today, Mr. Mikhail Thompson, who is currently the head of the newly formed Counter-Information Influence section at the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, and he has been responsible for MSB activities to counter foreign interference since 2009, including as head of Global Monitoring and Analysis section. He also headed the agency's 2 task forces to protect the national general elections 2 years ago and the European Parliament election last year against foreign interference. Now we will have other great speakers today as a part of this panel, such as Mirela Combaro, Deputy Chair of Media Parliamentary Committee from Albania, Zoran Trajčevski, Director of the Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services from North Macedonia, Ranko Vujovic from Montenegro, President of Agency for Electronic Media, Josip Popovac from Croatia, member of the Electronic Media Council, and Luann Latifi, Chief Executive of Independent Media Commission from Kosovo. I will remind you to use our Q&A button. You will see it at the bottom of your Zoom app currently. You can use it to ask any questions, make any comments, remarks anytime during the discussion, and then we will have enough time for the Q&A session after the panel. And at this point, I am glad to invite Amela to start with this panel. Now, Amela, I will just ask you to unmute yourself because we cannot hear you. Thank you.
That's better now. Okay. Okay, so I'll just repeat myself. So, dear participants, distinguished panelists, good morning and welcome to our panel, where we are going to discuss, look at the disinformation in the Western Balkans and how to address it from the institutional perspective. Before I start, really allow me to congratulate the organizer and congratulate the panelists and the moderators, because yesterday we had a wonderful opportunity really to hear such fruitful presentations and discussions, etc. And Hannah, allow me to congratulate you. You've been yesterday and you are an outstanding conference moderator. So it is my honor to be this morning and today with you and to moderate this panel. Yesterday, we've heard a lot about concerns about disinformation. We've heard a lot about good practices. We've heard a lot about challenges. However, the Western Balkans is very specific, because according to the research, the fact is that the majority of Western Balkans countries have the lowest level, lowest resilience potential to deal with misinformation and its effect, and that the countries in the Western Balkans are the most vulnerable in Europe when it comes to disinformation. Especially today, looking from the institutional perspective, this topic is extremely challenging for us as the regulatory authorities, and we will try in the next 19 minutes to present, our panelists are going to, they will present their views, share good practices, as well as point out to some challenges and potential solutions about the competencies and responsibilities of public institutions in tackling the issue of disinformation, about the institutional responses and policies in dealing with disinformation in the Western Balkans, most importantly about the models of collaboration that would secure that the whole government and the governmental and social approach merge in dealing with disinformation. We are also going to talk about the mechanism on how to improve the overall resilience, and inevitably we are going to present and discuss the scope of activities within the media and information literacy. So without further ado, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Mikhail Thompson, to deliver his keynote presentation. And after him, our other panelists will deliver their addresses, which are going to inspire you, I'm sure, to have a very fruitful discussion. So, Mr. Thompson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for having me here at this conference. And I would like actually also to thank very much everyone for yesterday. It was really interesting to listen into the discussions with the different panels, but also listening into the questions that were raised. And I think we more or less share the same problems globally when it comes to disinformation. I'm not at my office right now, as you maybe can say that, well, it doesn't look like this at my office. Unfortunately, my neighbor just starting to drill. They're doing some reconstruction. So please tell me if you can't hear me, then I'll switch to headphones instead. I will give the government perspective, and I would actually like to ask RCC to put up my presentation. Thank you very much. Just as a start, the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, which is a tongue-twisting name that I will refer to as MSB from now on, is an all hazards agency. We work with crisis management, civil defense, developing rescue services capabilities in our society. We work with cybersecurity and identifying and countering information influence activities targeting Sweden. And this is what I'm going to talk about today and our experiences with working with this. Next slide, please. In Sweden, we have a long history of what we call psychological defense. And this is to prepare our population against psychological warfare. That has been our fundamental standpoint when it comes to foreign interference and foreign disinformation. And we've been having these systems for the last 70 years, actually. But as the imminent threat, military threat decreased in the Northern Europe during the 1990s and 2000s, we focused on more civilian issues, for instance, crisis management. It wasn't until 2014 we really changed our perspectives again and came back to more or less the old Cold War perspectives on these issues. And that was, of course, when one country in Europe invaded another country and lied about it. And I'm talking about Crimea, of course. This really changed things in Sweden, and we started to prepare ourselves against foreign disinformation, because we realized you can come very far with just deception nowadays. And the information environment has become very vulnerable to this. So this happened in 2014. Our politics changed during 2015. And in 2016, my agency got in our appropriation the task that we should have a good capability to identify and counter information influence activities and targeting Sweden. And we should also support other agencies, authorities, and relevant actors in our society to be prepared to do this too. And this was a change, of course, and this is the first step for us in reshaping and reorganizing towards a psychological defense again. But there have been some shifts since our Cold War perspectives on psychological defense and foreign disinformation. It's not about war anymore. It's about competitions between nations, and we need to prepare that. But what is this? Information influence activities. I'm not saying disinformation, deception, or propaganda. I'm saying information influence activities. Well, we define it as an activity when someone from abroad uses information in a way that it has negative effects on our national security objectives. So if you spread disinformation or propaganda that will threaten the safety and security of our population, or that will threaten the functionality of our society, or the fundamental values of our society, such as our democracy, freedom of speech, or our individual rights, then we see that as something we need to deal with. And that is what we define as information influence activities. And usually it is foreign disinformation, deception, and propaganda that have a negative effect or negative consequences. That means also that we don't see it as illegal. It doesn't have to be warfare. It has to be something that is not good for us, and then we need to have a proportionate response, which doesn't mean war or legal actions usually. It means other things that I will come to later. And I've been responsible for these activities since at our agency since 2009. I worked with this for 12 years, more or less now. And what have we learned so far? Next slide, please. Unfortunately, disinformation and deception has become more or less a standard tool for some nations to influence others. They use this to shape our behavior, and it's very cheap and effective, and very often it has no repercussions. This is the issue I think everyone is talking about when it comes to disinformation. It's easy, accessible, highly effective. What I would like to stress also is actually what they are peddling, the ones peddling disinformation, is actually they're peddling a faulty product. Because what we're talking about is someone lying and deceiving, so it will benefit that organization or person's needs and often have a negative effect on us, the victims, the targets. And of course, no one wants to be lied to. And I think we tend to think that we are able to have our own opinion. So if you're going to use disinformation or propaganda, then the audience, the target audience, has to be vulnerable. And when we looked at this, we realized that influence campaigns only work if there are certain vulnerabilities in a society. And the main ones, the most important ones that we have seen is actually if you lack awareness about the threat of disinformation, then you're vulnerable. If you lack the awareness about your own vulnerabilities to certain kinds of information, then you're vulnerable too, because then you don't know what will trigger you. But also, if you have awareness about the threat, that there is someone trying to lie to you, and you know in which areas they can actually trigger your behavior, that's not enough. You actually also need coordination, cooperation, and communication. You need to help each other and warn each other when you see disinformation, and create an awareness of what's going on, and also actually cooperate and collaborate to counter disinformation. Because imagine being in a municipality and then a large, a superpower intelligence organization decides that we're going to influence this municipality because it's in our economical interest. It's going to be tough for you on a municipality level to protect yourself against disinformation. But if you get the support of other municipalities, of state organizations, of the civil society and media to counter this, suddenly they're in your backyard and you're much stronger. So, and that's why coordination and cooperation is so important. And another issue is actually to influence is actually to be heard. To be able to influence, you have to actually expose your own narratives and reach out to the target audiences. And at the same time, as an antagonist, you need to hide your intent and your activities, because otherwise people will know that you're trying to harm them and it's bad for them. So if you're being exposed, your effect will diminish or even be nullified. Another point that we have to consider is also that in a democracy, there is a connection between leaders and population. The leaders need the trust and support of the population, otherwise they will be voted out. And thereby, if you're an antagonist using disinformation, you actually need to target both the population and the leaders at the same time. And when we see what's going on around the world and towards Sweden, we see that the outreach is preferable with disinformation is usually done to reach groups using traditional media, social media platforms, diplomacy, and through advertising or other mass media. There are other tools also, of course, but the reach out has to be where the population is and where the leaders are, and you need to do this coordinated. So to put it together, countering a faulty product should be easy, shouldn't it? Well, listening to what we heard yesterday and actually what we all know, it's not. That's why we're sitting here. There is no silver bullet. Since I've been working with these issues now for 12 years, I can just conclude that this is an ongoing effort that is constantly changing. And what do we do then? Well, I would like now to talk a bit about how we as a government agency are organized to increase awareness and cooperation and build capability among relevant actors in Sweden, just to show what our effort looks like when it comes to finding a solution to this problem. Next slide, please. Psychological defense or countering disinformation is, of course, something you have to do with the whole of society approach. So this is my team in my section and how we're organized. But this is only a manifestation of how we need to reach out to the society. And I would like to talk a bit about the functions I have within my, or the different branches. Okay, you have me at the top there as the head of the team, but I'll start also with highlighting research and development. This team I have is an enabler that will support the other branches actually with international cooperation, research, training, and exercises. And what we learned as a government agency and structure, you need to focus on procurement, for instance, when you direct and research, training, and exercises, because you need to do things by the book. Otherwise, that will be something that you will be they will use against you. And of course, it's also good bureaucracy to have a structure for these things. But this shows also the importance of democratic tools, and research is a very good tool to counter disinformation because it's transparent through its methods and also its outcomes, and it's available to everyone. The other team I have is the threat analysis team, and their job is then, of course, to find and identify foreign threat actors trying to use information influence activities against our country. And of course, we have a country focus. We look at specific countries, and I don't need to highlight them here. I think you can guess our problems. But I would like to emphasize there, we do not look for disinformation among our own population. We have a method where we'll look at the aggressors instead. And this was highlighted and discussed yesterday. And the reason for this is, as soon as you start to search for disinformation, primarily within your own information environment, then you risk actually registering your own population's freedom of speech. And you shouldn't do that. So that's why we actually have a very high focus on the threat activities first. And what we do is that we try to identify the infrastructure of different nations and organizations, information influence capabilities, and then try to listen what they are saying. And after that, then we look into our country to see how that is disseminated and attacked us, and thereby saying that foreign actors are threats. Disinformation people within our society, people who use disinformations, are vulnerabilities. We distinguish them because even though you spread disinformation, you have the same rights to freedom of speech and be protected within our society. Then I have a team for operational response, and that's when we see disinformation and we see that there are vulnerabilities, they create action plans to support other agencies or our own activities. And then finally, resilience team. And this is the team I would like to highlight today in today's presentation. The most effective way to counter disinformation is actually to mitigate vulnerabilities. When you mitigate already ongoing for disinformation activities, you're behind. Yeah, the other ones have already started. But if you're ahead and create resilience, then they will not have an effect. And it's awareness and cooperation, of course. And we've prioritized a couple of sectors where this team actually work with resilience and create resilience, but they also try to identify vulnerabilities. And it's agencies and authorities, it's regional and local government and authorities, traditional media, social media, and once every 4 years or 2 years ahead of every fourth year, also the election administration. I wish I had more sectors where I could have people, but even our resources are scarce. But we will grow. We will in 2022. We will increase our organization. I will also have a team looking at vulnerabilities among the population, civil society, and private sector. And in the private sector, I will prioritize energy, transport, the defense industry, and finance. Some of the activities we have conducted so far when it comes to awareness is actually, we've had an awareness training for 14,000 civil servants and civil society members. And this training is ranging from 4 hours to 2 days. We've also had tabletop exercises for civilian total defense agencies in how to counter disinformation in the warlike situations. And that is to prepare for the national total defense exercise we will have next year. We've distributed a handbook for communicators in how to identify and counter information influence activities. It's actually also available in English on our website. I can see if I can later on share that link, because our methods are transparent when it comes to countering. We have nothing to hide as the aggressor do. We've supported a media institute called FOJO. It means more or less continuous training for journalists, where we also have set up a training where they can learn how to identify and handle information influence activities. And we've also helped to set up a web training for this media institute. But we only support, we do not cooperate. It's a very clear distance between us and media. And one other big thing we've done is, of course, being available and transparent to news media about what we do, our threat perspective, and our national vulnerabilities. And this we do, of course, to reach out to the population. And media play a key actor here, because they have the role to investigate the government, us, for instance. but they're also independent from the government control. And this makes them a trusted narrator among the population. And as I say, we have nothing to hide. So for us, it's about being transparent towards them. That will have a positive effect on society and create trust. Final thing that we've been doing is actually also cooperation. And we've set up a concept we call the National Operational Forum. We activate this in case of large-scale influence campaigns or as a preparation before major events such as elections. And what we do is actually that we take all relevant stakeholders regarding a critical societal function, for instance, or a vulnerability, and put them together with the stakeholders working against foreign threats. And then we put them around the table to discuss. And we did this, for instance, during our general elections in 2018. And around the table on one side, we put the election authority, a county representing all counties and municipalities, the tax authority, and these are the key players in our election, in the conduct of our election. On the other side, we have the security police, the national police, and my agency. And together, we would share information about our planned activities, share information about threats and vulnerabilities. And from that, we could actually do action plan together and prepare communication together. And from that, we can then conduct a reach out to society through media to increase awareness about the vulnerabilities and threats and to create trust. And our goal is to support our population, media, and the political parties with enough information about our measures so they know that Sweden is conducting a safe and secure election and that they feel trust in this. And so they can also focus actually on the main issue. And that is what they should vote, on which party or idea they should vote. To sum things up now, at last slide, please. If there are any things I would like to put forward here as a government institution, if you work at a government institution, then you should have the capability to increase awareness about the threat and the vulnerabilities. And you need to increase that capability with a whole of society approach. Cooperation and collaboration becomes extremely important also, and you need to build structures for that. And then, of course, you need to be able to identify and counter disinformation. And here I would like to stress, you need to really make a difference between foreign disinformation from state actors and what's going on inside your country, because you have the freedom of speech that you need to protect. And to do this, you have to have a mindset. And of course, it's team effort with the whole of society approach. Everyone is in on this and has to be in on it. You need to work with transparency. The aggressor needs to hide their intent and their activities. You don't. So transparency will work for you. And then, of course, I've said it before, reach out is very important to media, civil society, and the population, because we have nothing to hide. But all these activities together, they create trust among the population. It's nothing you can expect to get. It's through your activities you gain trust. I will stop there.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. I mean, this was indeed a very useful. You shared with us very useful information and shared good practice of Sweden. So, thinking about today's security environment, it is crucial as it looks to understand how rapidly things are changing, and especially technology, and how it could be used for malicious intent. And most importantly, it is crucial that countries ensure the highest level of preparedness. Okay. What really, as I was listening to your presentation, what struck me as really as a point of high importance is that countries should develop a strategy for collaborative approach on how to collaborate and create a so-called collaborative toolbox, okay, to ensure consistency because the fragmented efforts by different stakeholders definitely cannot deliver the results, that are long-term and that are very efficient and that really prepare, every country sort of like to counter the disinformation in the way it should be. So you opened a space for discussion, and I would really encourage the participants to jot down the questions to ask you. I mean, it is really such a privilege to have you as our keynote speaker. So I'm sure that we will take advantage of your experience, of your knowledge later on when we come back to questions and answers. So thank you very much for now. And now we are moving to our next speaker, and that is Ms. Mirela Combaro, Deputy Chair of Media Parliamentary Committee of Albania. Ms. Combaro, do we have you with us?
Do you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you and we can see you, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So what can you tell us about how Albania is getting ready, or how is responding or combating this information, this era of challenging topic of disinformation?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation, but above all, thank you for organizing this conference to talk about information and its enemy, the disinformation. I know I'm invited here as the Deputy Chair of Media Parliamentary Committee in Albania, but in my whole life, I was mostly an academic and a journalist before becoming involved in politics. For our countries, the role of the media, freedom of expression, freedom of speech are crucial issues for democracy and for stability itself. Often our countries are summarized under the label, as in this conference also, under the label of Western Balkans. Just 2 words, because I want to share with you the idea that I don't like the definition at all, Western Balkans, because 30 years ago, we were part of the so-called Eastern Europe, then the countries of Southeastern Europe. Now we have become the Western Balkans. It seems as if someone is pushing us more and more towards the periphery of a center which is self-determining as a center and which reserves all the exclusive rights to define where the periphery is. But I think that the differences between Western Balkans and the European Union are not those between the center and the periphery, but above all, those which make the difference between the old democracies from the new ones. And this in a world where the new democracies, as Albania, for example, are asked to achieve in a few decades, even in a few years, what the old democracies achieved in 2 or 3 centuries. But this is our daily challenge, and we are committed to doing it rather well than badly. Find and safeguard the fragile balance between media freedom and respect for other human rights, between freedom of expression and disinformation or manipulation of information. This is a difficult exercise, but it is a challenge to be met at all costs. The period of the pandemic crisis shows that it is not only a challenge for our countries, but we are all witnesses that this is a global challenge. Disinformation can kill in times of pandemic, said Joseph Borrell a few weeks ago when the European Parliament approved the creation of a special committee to fight against disinformation and infodemic. I think I underlined the word infodemic as pandemic. I think that even if the risks come much more from the misuse of the social networks, we do not solve the problems by reducing communication in social networks, not at all by removing them. Quite the contrary. Let me say that after spending half of my life under the widest of dictatorships, I think that this communication is, with all the problems, is beneficial for our societies. We need to communicate in order to, how to say, to compensate the decades of non-communication, of censorship, of dictatorship. I think, and I strongly believe, that it is by strengthening the professional media that we can control disinformation. As we said yesterday during the first day of this conference, the public trust in the professional media makes the difference and protects against disinformation, which means that self-regulation of the media and clear and transparent rules are important pillars. But self-regulation, that is to say, which means the capacity of the media and journalists to organize themselves, goes hand in hand with the evolution of democracy, the emancipation of society, and the level of education with the proper use of information, which means media literacy, which means how to use cyberspace and how not to fall victim to disinformation. This needs education, and quickly. While the setup of clear and transparent rules is a task also for legislators in permanent dialogue with the media players and civil society. In Albania, the Audiovisual Media Authority, which is the authority who monitors the media, does not depend on the government, but on the parliament. This authority was established by law on 2013, only for radio and television broadcasting. Now, let's say 7-8 years after after the creation of this authority, we have started 1 year ago, we have initiated, let's say, a legal initiative to expand the functions of this authority on the online media, especially to protect minors whose identity has often been abused, revealed, mistreated by the media, in order to respect the dignity of the individual and to protect them from disinformation in the event of a crisis like the one we are in. I emphasize professional online media, not social networks. So the idea is not to extend or to expand the role of this authority on the how we use social networks, but only the professional media who are now using not only radio and television, but also the portals, which means the online professional media. This initiative was subjected to a great and long, big and long public debate, because we are well aware that it is a rather sensitive and fragile matter. Now, 1 year after, we consider that this draft law has been sufficiently improved during these debates and in a close cooperation with experts from OSCE Media, the Venice Commission, the Council of Europe, and the European Commission. And it is of primary importance for the Albanian institution to address in the draft law some effective tools for finding a just balance between freedom of media, freedom of expression, and the right for access to justice, to remedy potential violation of human rights by false information in compliance with the standards enshrined in the European Convention of Human Rights and the case law of the European Court of Human Rights. In the meantime, in order to address the problem of malicious or irresponsible media behavior on the internet, the Venice Commission encourages the Albanian authority to support the setting up of an effectively functioning and independent self-regulatory body. But this body should absolutely involve all the relevant stakeholders of the media community and capable of ensuring an effective and respected system of media credibility in the online media field through self-regulation. It is furthermore necessary to ensure that effectiveness of the existing legal and in particular judicial remedies combating disinformation and hate speech committed via online publications. So to summarize, maybe we can have the possibility to talk again and to answer if some questions are made by the audience. To summarize, we are working now in order to have a final revised draft in line with the recommendation of Venice Commission and the expert of Council of Europe as soon as possible, but after that to consult it again with stakeholders and civil society, and after that to discuss it or adopt it in the Parliament within this year. And with this, we are not, I said, alone, because we have consulted a lot of other models of this kind of regulations or laws in Europe or even in the region. I mean, Croatian model, in Macedonia, in Serbia, in Montenegro, in order to be online with all the other experiences talking about this new, let's say, way to do media, to practice media, which is the internet now and the new technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such an inspiring presentation. You raised many issues that are really that the regulators in the region are dealing with. Most importantly, I would like to just remind the participants on a very important point that you made, and that is referring to the need to maintain and to protect freedom of expression and media freedom, because any definition of disinformation in legislation or any other regulation or such as regulatory guidance must take into the account the serious implications it could have for freedom of expression and freedom of media. Secondly, you raise the point that it's important to strengthen professional media and increase education, which is really a key in combating disinformation. As far as the policymakers, as far as the relationship between policymakers and the regulatory authorities is concerned, the most important thing is really to ensure the independence of regulatory authorities. And when it comes to regulatory framework, regulators do have very clear guidance and obligations set in the international act, but also and primarily defined by the new Directive for Audiovisual Media Services, where the competencies of the regulatory authorities have been slightly stretched, because from now on we will be obliged to also develop regulatory framework for the video sharing platforms. And we are entering in this online space. That's why I'm very pleased you mentioned self-regulation, but also we should really bear in mind that now we are again leveling it up as the directive also prescribes, and that is to develop and to strengthen the co-regulation as an approach, which means that, you know, the traditional regulatory framework and self-regulatory is now really should be merging more than ever, and to sort of like to develop, to work, to go towards the co-regulation. So definitely, I'm also pleased that you mentioned that you touched upon how the disinformation has been treated during COVID. And actually, the matter of fact that yes, in many countries, we've seen immediate responses by the regulatory authorities that were aimed at broadcasters and somehow reminded them that it's important more than ever to broadcast responsible, accurate, and correct information regarding COVID-19. So Thank you very much. This has been, as I said, very inspiring, and you gave us a lot of food for thought. And now we are moving on to the regulatory lot, I would say. And our next speaker is Mr. Zoran Trajčevski, Director of Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services in North Macedonia. Hello, Zoran, are you with us?
Hello. Hello. Distinguished participants, dear moderator Ms. Sodobasic, dear colleagues, allow me first of all to express my gratitude for the invitation to yesterday and today's conference, which address one of the key problems of not only the Western Balkans, but globally as well. In recent years, we have witnessed an influx of disinformation, the intensity of which has been on the rise at certain times, depending on current events. The global COVID-19 pandemics led to the appearance of disinformation or insufficiently verified information that posed an additional problem in dealing with and protecting against the virus. The phenomena was not unique to Macedonia. A number of other societies faced it as well. The reasons were different. Some were a consequence of the media's race for exclusivity. Certain media, and in our country this is especially true about the online media, publish articles with bombastic headlines to obtain as many views as possible, while the texts themselves had false content. To illustrate this, I am going to give you an example. Several online media outlets, including the one online edition of one very popular national television station, aired the news that Greece has banned entry to residents from municipalities of Macedonia with the highest numbers of infected persons, including the municipalities of Tetovo and Chais. The news referred to a picture of an alleged press release by the Greek Foreign Ministry. The information was later refuted by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, while the photo was found to have been photoshopped. Nevertheless, the media that had published this disinformation did not air any correction, but only removed the news from their pages. Despite the fact that it was refuted, the disinformation continued to be #1 news in the aggregators. Furthermore, during the state emergency, the government had declared due to the coronavirus outbreak, some state institutions were spotted favoring certain media outlets by providing them with information before the official publications of the daily reports on the number of the newly infected and diseased persons. As this information were most often incomplete, there was a discrepancy between these figures and the officially published data, which in turn used to create confusion among the public and caused the distrust in the healthcare institution to increase. The Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services reacted publicly against this phenomena and reminded that providing the citizens with accurate and timely information was the top priority and was essential to the public interest. It called on the media to be guided in their work by the professional journalistic standards and principles, and not by the principles of exclusivity. At the same time, we appeal to the competent authorities to distribute complete information to all media at the same time and to ensure equal access for all of them. In July this year, we had parliamentary elections, and as you know, nowadays election cycles and fertile ground are fertile ground for placing fake news. Some of these were related to the COVID-19 crisis. For example, shortly before the voting days, a screenshot appeared on the social media networks of an online media outlet reading that the 15th of July elections will be used to vaccinate voters as a part of Bill and Melinda Gates project. Given that this news went in package with the logo and the background of the online media outlet at issue, many would not doubt its authenticity, despite the fact that the news was shared without a link leading to it. Although this screenshot spread on the social network, fortunately it was not taken over or published by other media, most likely because the later recognized this as fake news. What can we do as a regulatory authority in the fight against the disinformation and fake news? Guided by the legal obligation to promote media literacy, in 2017, the Agency for Audio and Audiovisual Media Services launched an invitation to establish the Media Literacy Network. The founders included educational institutions, civil society organizations, media outlets, and state institutions, two of which were ministries, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy. Since the number of the network's members has been growing continuously, and currently we have 61 members. The agency and the network have been undertaking various activities to promote and increase the critical understanding of media content. The second media literacy days were completed last week. They were held within the framework of UNESCO's Global Media and Information Literacy Week. Under the motto, "Test every news with no excuse," we organized a number of workshops, debates, webinars, and other online events focused on the different aspects of media literacy and intended for different target groups. A special emphasis was placed on the fight against disinformation, the recognition of fake news and disinformation, as well as the conspiracy theories related to the COVID-19. Many of the activities were designed for students and teachers due to the need to raise awarenesses about the importance of media literacy among the youngest population, as well as about its integration into the educational process. In this context, 2 years ago, in cooperation with several members of the Media Literacy Network, the agency distributed a number of DVDs along with various educational materials for both the teachers and students to all primary schools across the country, with the aim of increasing the knowledge and awarenesses about the media literacy. Together with the Media and Journalistic Association and the self-regulatory body for media ethics, the agency has taken an activity part in promoting and raising the professional journalistic standards in reporting. We keep discussing these issues with the broadcasters and other relevant stakeholders at the public meetings as well. In this context, several of Council of Europe's publications and other documents were translated into Macedonian with the Council of Europe support, which we then published and distributed to the general public. There are other important regulatory aspects as well in the fight against disinformation, such as the media industry's economic development and sustainability and its ownership transparency. Under the circumstances of a global pandemic, where all are facing financial difficulties, and media outlets are no exception to this at all, in March this year, agency donated about 1.7 million euros to the radio and television media outlets. As for transparency, we regularly monitor the publication of data on media operations, including data on their ownership structure, founding sources, earned revenues and incurred expenditures. And we have also started preparing annual reports on media ownership, including the changes to media ownership and media concentration. Finally, I would like to point out that regardless of whether we are a regulator, civil society association, journalist association, or state institution, we are all faced with numerous challenges. Yet we must not forget that we all share a common goal, having professional media and media literate citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. I mean, you've done really a lot, and especially during the pandemic caused by COVID. You raised brilliant points, and you absolutely summed up all the sort of like right directions in which the regulatory authority should go. I would just like to touch upon the points on the importance of media literacy, because as it looks in the considering that in the online environment, where the possibility to direct content regulation diminishes, the need for media literate public increases. But what is very important really to bear in mind that media literacy is not a skill to be obtained and just consistently maintained, but rather it's an ever-changing process that requires constant reflections and adaptations. And this is, of course, because of the change of the people's needs for media literacy. However, it plays a vital role in the formulation of public policy and regulatory authorities and etc. So I would, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Communications Regulatory Agency, we last year established a Department for Media and Information Literacy. And it started as, we started sort of like doing some smaller activities, and now it has really, expanded, and it expanded from one month to another. The networking is very important. Creating platforms for media literacy and gathering all relevant stakeholders is crucial. So I am, as I could see in Northern Macedonia and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm sure in Montenegro, the situation is more or less the same when it comes to this proactive approach of the regulatory authority. So therefore, I'm going to, introduce my next speaker, that's Mr. Ranko Vujovic, President of the Agency of Electronic Media for Montenegro. So Ranko, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody one more time. You probably know that situation in Western Balkan is almost the same. Like other countries, Montenegro facing big challenges when phenomenon of disinformation is in question. Montenegro hasn't any strategy or plan how to fight disinformation. We still rely on traditional tools we have in regulation and self-regulation. I must admit that these tools are obsolete and not efficient in this era of fake news, especially when disinformation campaigns are coming from media from other states or through different social networks. On state level, we haven't any institution or organization who systematically monitor spreading of disinformation. We have Agency for Electronic Media, who is in charge of accurate reporting in electronic media, but soon, with new audiovisual media service law expecting to be adopted in the next few months, even agency wouldn't be any more in position to sanction disinformation on TV and radio. All professional standards in media will be left to self-regulation, and regulator will deal only with hate speech and protection of minors. Having in mind all the problems with fake news, Agency for Electronic Media last 2 years, together with UNESCO, implementing media literacy project, trying to increase level of media literacy among citizens. Because polarized media community, we haven't joined self-regulatory body in the country. We have one self-regulatory body which gather one part of media, but other have ombudsman or have nothing. The fragmentation of self-regulation caused the weak self-regulation system in the country. I must admit that we in Montenegro haven't problem with disinformation in traditional media. From time to time, it's happening that some media published fake news, but we have a disinformation campaign and systematic spreading of false information. We have biased one side, partial or misleading information, but not systematic spreading of fake news. Montenegro experience showed that disinformation campaigns primarily coming from Serbian media and from illegal news portals who are targeting Montenegro. When I'm saying illegal, I mean that these portals are not registered in Montenegro, that the owner, editors, or journalists are not known. These kind of portals are usually used for propaganda purposes in combination with spreading of fake news. And in the end, we have social networks and different Facebook pages and Twitter profiles who are made especially to disseminate fake informations. Montenegro haven't any instrument to defend itself from this kind of disinformation wars. I said that regarding fake news, we have problems with local media, but generally Montenegro didn't develop strong, independent and objective local media. In that situation, you have not too much trust in your media or any media citizen can easily be victim of disinformation propaganda. At the moment in Montenegro, with disinformation deals only NGO Center for Democratic Transition through the project Raskrinkavanje me. You listened yesterday probably about the project from the representative of CDT, and Digital Forensic Center, project of Atlantic Council of Montenegro. Digital Forensic Center is a project with the main goal of countering the problem of disinformation and fake news, as well as reducing problems of digital media literacy through events, workshops, lectures that will raise awareness of this issue. The last analysis of DFC showed that Serbian media published 11,000 articles about Montenegro in previous year. Daily coverage of Serbian media on Montenegro would not be important at all if it hadn't been dominated by disinformations, fake news, sensational headlines, and the narratives addressing the broad audience. For example, I will mention the most frequent narratives in Serbian media, like Montenegro is a criminal and captured state, Serbs are in danger in Montenegro, deprived of any rights, which was supported by claims that Serbia would protect them from discrimination of the Montenegrin regime. The adoption of the law on freedom of religion and belief, the procession and developments in the city of Budva gave rise to another narrative. Montenegro is an unstable state where riots and civil war may occur and where the Montenegrin regime is using repression. Even the global coronavirus pandemic did not lower the tone of the Serbian online media. Moreover, they were writing that Montenegrin government was unable to cope with the virus and that it had been hiding the numbers of the infected. The fact that we had been the last country in Europe to report on positive cases and first to declare corona-free destination did not prevent Serbian tabloids from continuing their hunt by publishing that we had neither laboratories nor PCR tests. It is very hard to find solutions for stopping spreading of disinformation in the region. As most of the fake news coming through social networks, region should wait on Europe to find efficient tool for regulation or disinformation on social networks. Our agency work on media literacy, but the question is this enough and what else can we do to fight fake news? Thank you.
Thank you, Ranko, for this very direct and very honest presentation when it comes to challenges that lie ahead of the regulatory authorities in the region and all the challenges that are imposed upon us with the digital age that is, I don't want to say fast approaching, I mean, it's already there. So one thing is for sure, and that is that what we are going to see what we are already seeing, and what is going to be even more evident in the next few years, is going to be this shift, major shift in the regulatory approach We just, as you said, I mean, we will be left unless we hop on this train and really do our best to strengthen the collaboration with self-regulatory authorities and develop these collaborative tools with other relevant stakeholders. We will be then left, with regulating, as you said, rightly pointed out, hate speech, and we will be dealing with the regulation of the content, that is broadcast through the traditional media and relevant to the minors. Yeah, I absolutely understand, and I think that we, at the regulatory authorities, should really revise our strategies on how to respond to these new issues and new challenges. And I will just repeat what I said before, and this is really to work together and to develop the very effective collaborative tools and identify the sort of collaborative toolbox. Regional cooperation is more than needed, or now than it has been ever, because we've had some other cases in the past where we really worked together and tried to find the best regulatory approach, and we succeeded. So I'm sort of like positive that we could make it this time as well. This could also be introduction.
If I may add, Amela.
Yes, Franco.
If I may add, generally, the problem is that disinformation campaign, which coming from abroad, they are out of jurisdiction, even regulator or self-regulator in the country. This is the problem. We haven't jurisdiction over this.
Absolutely, and that's why we go back to the presentation of Mr. Thompson. I mean, so that's why this sort of like collaborative approach with other state institutions, urging them to establish the agencies with the competencies such as in Sweden or in other developed countries, so that we can all work together. I mean, this is not a one-man show. This is really not even you're right. The mandate and the abilities of regulatory authorities are really restricted. You can't do it alone. But and it's just that's why such opportunities are really good, that we identify who are the other addresses and who are the other state institutions that we can link to, and if there aren't that, then there should be urgency to develop them. So okay, so this could be a sort of like introduction for our next speaker, and that's Mr. Josip Popolot, member of the Electronic Media Council and the Electronic Media Agency from Croatia. It is going to be very interesting to hear the presentation of Croatia as a member of the European Union, because we are all waiting, for you, as Franco said. I mean, we need guidance on in which direction we should sort of like move, or we should be moving. So, Mr. Popolot, the floor is yours now, and please enlighten us on what is ahead of us and what could be done. What is being done on the level of the members of the European Union?
Please don't expect too much. Good morning to all. First of all, I will thank you to invite me on this webinar and this gathering to discuss about main issue now, regulatory issue is countering on disinformation. I will concentrate on the activity of the regulators in Croatia and in whole Europe, and the reach of our forces on this field. So, at the beginning, in 2019, the European Commission and ERGA, European Regulators Group and for Audiovisual Media Service, agreed to cooperate with the aim in resolve relevance with all online platforms. The reason of this decision of the European Commission are the logistical and the professional resource of national regulatory authorities. Within ERGA, which is the Commission's advisory body for audiovisual media services, There is a working group dealing with disinformation, within which all the agency had each representatives. As a result of each work in 2020, ERGA adopted the disinformation report, which was submitted to the Commission. According to the recommendations, the same of definitions should be used by online service providers. This will ensure a consistent approach across the EU. The next recommendation relates to providing of information by online platforms. It is proposed that online platforms provide access to data sets, data monitoring tools, and country-specific data. This will allow national regulators to develop their own analysis tools and the filters so that they can more easily detect the source on false information. Also, guidelines should be developed to improve the relationship between online platforms and the fact-checker organization, improve the relationship between online platforms and their user related to filing compliance and tagging controversial content, strengthening media literacy campaigns, strengthening relationship between researchers and online platforms. In conclusion, it is proposed to move from, this is very important, self-regulatory regime to regulatory, co-regulatory approach that has stronger structure and is more stable as a tool to combat disinformation, and which will be the responsibility of national electronic media regulators in the future. The report shows that the EU Code of the Praxis on disinformation is an important step in the monitoring disinformation on the internet, as it has led to a new relationship between the platforms, the EU and the national audiovisual regulators. Although some platforms have made clearer efforts to comply with the agreed measures. Furthermore, there is a need for greater transparency of the platforms, including much more detailed data, especially country-specific data, on how signatures implement the code. Furthermore, some of the measures listed in the code are too general and therefore not implemented by the signatures in the same way. Therefore, ERGA proposed that the platforms allow national regulators to independently monitor data, data monitor tools, and country-specific information. In addition, ERGA is in a work program for 2020 proposes support to the European Commission in setting relevant definitions, including political advertising, and the guidelines to ensure a more consistent approach. The code has been signed by a small number of stakeholders and does not include important platforms as well as information and communication service and representatives of the advertising industry operating in the European Union. Therefore, ERGA suggests that all possible efforts should be made to increase the number of platforms that accept the code in order to avoid regulatory asymmetry. The Agency for Electronic Media, Croatian agency, pays special attention to media literacy. Within media literacy, special emphasis is placed on technique for recognizing and spotting of the disinformation. I am also organizes and co-organizes experts meeting on the topic of disinformation and the civil behavior on a communication channel, on all communication channels. The IM and UNICEF conduct a distance learning on a verify of media literacy topics with an emphasis on disinformation and critical thinking. This was done in cooperation with the Ministry of Science and Education. Classes were recorded by the teachers for different age groups based on the educational material provided by the IM. And this is very nice and good job. IM, in collaboration with each permanent partner in UNICEF, has launched a digital campaign to raise awarenesses of the problem of disinformation and the importance of developing media literacy skills, especially by improving critical thinking and knowledge, in order to help identifying fake news and protecting against disinformation and manipulation. The campaign was conducted in collaboration with Facebook, which provided advertising space and supported the project, while the second part of the campaign took place on portals. Additionally, in order to provide help for the local radio and TV station, the agency has produced a video that, among other things, warned against disinformation and stressed the importance of providing information from reliable sources. IM will continue to improve its work on empowering citizens with media literacy and critical thinking skills in various ways through each two main platforms: the web portal mediskapismenost.hr and the Project Media Literacy Days, within which educational materials and brochures are being prepared and lectures, panels, as well as media campaigns are being organized. It's difficult to make these events in this occasion of pandemic, but we hope that will be pandemic ended and we start with our activity again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Popolot. It's really, yes, it is challenging from one hand. It is also inspiring, and really, I mean, you said in the beginning that we shouldn't have higher expectations. But for your information, we here in Bosnia and Herzegovina do follow what both regulatory authorities of Croatia are doing in the area, in the field of media information literacy. And yes, you are, well ahead of us, and there are a lot of good examples that we can really, that we can take and then try to sort of like replicate. Everything that is good should be replicated, right? As for the report on this information issued by ERGA, what I would like to say, I would like to encourage the regulatory authorities, of course, all of us who are not members of the EU and cannot be member of ERGA, really, I mean, to join as observers, because we have done that and we find it very useful. All the resources that we can find, and that's the way how we sort of like develop knowledge inside of the agency, and at least we could see sort of like how the members of the EU are thinking on different subjects, and especially when it comes to this part of the report that deals with the with this information. There are really some very useful information, under the chapters of mapping the national media and press legislation and regulation, and then on the chapter of how to deal with political and issue-based advertising when it comes to this information, national measures regarding information on COVID, etc. So these are all sort of like really good resources for us to develop ourselves in that. So any further cooperation with the regulatory authority from Croatia, because we are converged regulatory authorities, so we really cooperate equally with your agency as well as HACOM, is highly appreciated, and it's really very important for us, considering that you are as Croatia is member of the EU, is already undergoing through all these processes. Now, last but not least important, I would like to announce our next speaker, and that's Mr. Luann Latifi, Chief Executive of Independent Media Commission from Kosovo. So Luann, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amela. Dear participants, dear organizers, friends and colleagues, for those who didn't have a chance to meet each other, my name is Luann Latifi, and as the Chief Executive Officer, I represent here the Independent Media Commission, a national regulatory authority in the Republic of Kosovo. I'm very sorry that I had to miss yesterday's part of the conference because I had to defend the IMC financial report in front of Parliamentary Committee for Budget and Finance. So my presence there was mandatory. So once again, I apologize. Okay, moving back to the subject, let's say that it is true that the production and dissemination of false news is a resource used by different sectors, groups and individuals aiming to create tendencies and distortions to the public opinion by favoring specific interests. But fake news is just the top of the huge iceberg in the process of this disinformation and misinformation that travels through the social fabric in much broader and structured context, feeding social action based on incomplete or manufactured facts. This whole process of information manipulation actions or pandemic situation that we face on, but it's not only due to the global digitalization. In our case, the traditional media, TV and radio stations that hold the IMC license are behaving correctly when it comes to the disinformation. I mean, they show respect on this phenomenon. And there could be very, very few cases in my experience that IMC have to deal with. Thus, most of the time, the code of conduct is respected from these media, but the main problem in our country remains, if I can say, the regulation of online media with the special emphasis of video sharing platforms that IMC still does not have any competency to regulate them or to deal with them, as it is foreseen by the new AVMS directive. Unfortunately, the implementation of existing legislation in Kosovo remains visual media services, as I mentioned, known as the video sharing platforms. And even though the new directive is covering these platforms. So there is an urgent need to amend the law of IMC based on including the AVMS provisions there. There is a self-regulatory body in Kosovo known as the Kosovo Press Council, which acts for print and online media, but they does not have any executive power. Thus, the owners of or chief editors are being member of this self-regulatory body based on their goodwill. In this case, a significant number of online media remains out of regulation of self-regulatory body, and the most problematic situation is created when some online media portals that appears at the specific moments, let's say, and especially before or during the elections, or certain moments during political developments in the country. For those media, it is impossible to have information about their ownership or to have any information who is behind those media. In most of the cases, we know that the mission of these media is spreading disinformation. While for the traditional media, including here the IMC licenses, there are not much cases that we need to treat disinformation cases. As a national regulator, public with disinformation in our country. Coordination between the main institutions that deals with protection of freedom of expression and the human rights based on a clear platform or strategy, it seems it is mandatory, and if I can say, we are late on this. In Kosovo, there is no strategy, as I heard from other countries as well, in the national level to combat the phenomenon such as fake news, disinformation, misinformation, and so on. And it remains for the relevant individual bodies and institutions to approach to those problems only within their legal competencies. Establishing of common mechanism of cooperation of relevant institutions, universities of relevant fields, experts and professionals of the field, media institutions and other stakeholders, and the interaction in activities remains as the only solution perhaps in the current situation to respond against disinformation. In Kosovo, the activities related to media literacy are organized by different actors, including the IMC itself, but we need to do more to be more productive and useful in having a long-term success. As well, Kosovo thinks that media literacy and critical thinking toward media understanding remains the crucial activity to fight disinformation. Therefore, in Kosovo, it is necessary to develop a mechanism at the state level with the aim to coordinate the activities of relevant actors and stakeholders, because the development of the technology and means of informations are very hard to identify them and to regulate them when it comes to the disinformation. The IMC, despite the limited financial and human resources, it is engaged in some activities that are related to media literacy, and we have support from international organizations such as the Council of Europe, OSCE, and stuff like that, including some local NGOs. We believe that education and training in the continuous flow are the ways that can approximate the differences that we see today, levels of cognition, access and use of digital functionalities, critical and reflexive thinking, and citizen engagement toward fighting the disinformation phenomenon in our media. I mean, we have to be more organized. We have problems with politics. It seems every year we have to have elections, and this is a big burden on the media regulation in general, because we still are maybe the one that still we didn't manage to work in digital transmission, to amend the law on IMC, to follow the standards of the European standards in media regulation in general. I would like to take your time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And sorry, there were moments where the connection was really breaking. So, but we did hear you, well, so to say. Well, Luann, what you presented is really, I mean, we are all facing more or less the same challenges, and I can just repeat, and I can commend you on the activities and your continuous striving really to, to work in the, as you said, I mean, under challenging circumstances, I'm thinking mainly all the sort of like the political context that the regulatory authorities function in our region. And I know that in Kosovo is, it could be a little bit more challenging than everywhere else, but we've always shared good practices and experiences, and we are willing to cooperate in future too. So now it's the time for questions and answers, and I would like to go back now to studio and ask Hannah if there are any new questions, and if there are not, I know that Hannah definitely has some questions for you. So Hannah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amela. Now, what we saw is that our speakers wrote some of the answers to the questions that our attendees had. So in case you've asked a question and are still waiting for an answer, check the answered tab in the Q&A part of the Zoom. So you probably got your answers. Since we do not have any more questions from our attendees, I would like to use some time to ask Mr. Thompson a question of my own. Now, basically, what's really interesting to me is the fact that the agency is called the Agency for Psychological Defense. And what I want to know is, do you think, not necessarily related to the work of this agency, but like more in general, do you think that sometimes psychological defense includes hiding the truth?
Yeah, I would say like this, that I wouldn't recommend this name of an agency to any other country. The reason why we can use this name is that we have a long history of this name when we felt that there was a greater threat from abroad. And as you say, there is worries about, are you also conducting psychological warfare yourself? And this is I think, a very common issue among alternative media regarding any public administration. And that's why we are really, how should I say, emphasizing transparency as a method to gain trust. The name in itself is very specific for Sweden.
Thank you. If we do not have any more questions from our attendees, I will ask you, Amela, to do a short wrap-up of what we heard during the last hour in a couple of sentences, and then we will take some time to do a bit longer wrap-up of what we heard in the last 2 days.
All right, thank you, Hannah. And again, I mean, I would like to thank to the panelists for really excellent presentations. So what we've heard at this panel is the conclusion that we could draw up is that the best way to prevent the phenomenon of disinformation is to create active, responsible citizens who will work to advance their critical thinking, fact-checking, interpretation and evaluation of all information they're exposed to, no matter what source they come from. And that is the key to creating a responsible society. We've also learned that it's important to promote a pluralist media landscape and support and protect independent and quality media outlets. Considering that digitally distributed disinformation is a new structural vulnerability of contemporary democracy, policy responses should not only focus on immediate reactions to the most blatant cases of disinformation, but perhaps more importantly, should think about solutions and create long-term resilience. We also learned that it is important to increase the transparency of digital ecosystem. Introducing, and I may be repeating myself, but introducing long-term sustainable policies to contrast the consequences of disinformation should be considered an important component of policies targeting security and stability in the region. Media literacy has been widely recognized as one of the most important tools in combating disinformation. And media literacy's importance is important in developing critical thinking and countering phenomena such as disinformation. That aspect cannot be highlighted enough. As well as education and critical thinking are regarded as an essential skill for citizens to engage on social media platforms. I would also mention that we've heard that collaborative approach and multi-stakeholders engagement, both nationally and regionally, is key in addressing the topics of disinformation, as well as timely development of collaborative tools. To achieve this, knowledge sharing and capacity building provided to national regulatory authorities and other state institutions is much needed. And finally, I would conclude by saying that these issues that I've mentioned need to be addressed with urgency, but also with a sense of responsibility. And that would be my sort of like shortish wrap up.
Thank you very much, Amela. What you mentioned a couple of times during the panel is the importance of collaborative approach. And then yesterday on the other side, we could hear that there is no, the relationship of kind of a cooperation between CSOs, media, and the institutions is not developed enough in fighting the issue of disinformation. On the other side, while talking about the media yesterday, we heard journalists saying that at this point of time, journalists need to defend their profession opposed to, you know, what happens with people simply representing to be journalists, but on the other side, serving for fake news and propaganda and so on. But for me, it seems like for the Western Balkans, it's always the same group of journalists defending the profession. And then at some points, it seems like a majority of those who are doing everything that's not in line with ethical journalism. At this point, I would like to invite Mr. Amir Kapitanovic, Head of Political Department of the Regional Cooperation Council, to say a few words to our panelists and attendees.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Greetings to all of you. I mean, it's been a pleasure to listening to all of you these 2 days. A lot of very constructive information and suggestions I heard. And I want to thank you for this. As we have come to an end of this 2 days virtual gathering, unfortunately, and as we have traveled around Europe in real time, peering even into your living rooms and offices, but more importantly, hearing from your thoughts and ideas, I want to use this opportunity to thank to all of you who have dedicated your precious time and energy for the success of this conference. Around 100 participants, give or take, representatives of regional organizations, governmental institutions, and media have gathered together, which is a sign, at least to me, of commitment, but also shows a magnitude of challenge we are facing with. I think that we have managed to at least touch upon the impact of disinformation from a different angles, and that was our intention from the very beginning. And as highlighted by speakers, disinformation can be related to external interference and hybrid threats, as information operations have been used to delegitimize, and this is, I'd like to especially accentuate this word and phrase, delegitimize democratic processes, or even, as we have heard and as we could see every day, undermine public health in times of this pandemic calamity. So fact checking is important, but it's not enough. Media literacy is essential, but it has to be embedded into the right context that only responsible democratic institutions can create. So information is often navigated from a faraway spots, as we heard at this last panel, which are not even in our jurisdiction, let alone which are well disguised in deep darkness of cyberspace. So we need a whole society approach, and I think that is, at least for me, one of the key messages of these 2 days conference, in which everyone has a role to play, like we showed these 2 days, getting together. Finding the adequate responses to minimize the impact of disinformation should be part of a comprehensive security strategy, and this is definitely something that RCC will embark on as a leading regional organization with a strong political mandate, but also with the mandate to let's say, work on this security cooperative order in the region. And we will, as I said, continue to invest the energy in this topic in the future, and we hope we can count on your support. I'm sorry, I really cannot finish my intervention without saying a few words of gratitude, risking to even omit someone and some people, but I hope I would be apologize for that. I commend and thank government of Italy for their support, not only for this conference, but their strong support to regional cooperation and prosperity in the region of the Western Balkans and the wider region. I'd like to particularly thank Osservatorio Balcani from Trento, in particular Luisa Chiodi and Giorgio, for their efforts and support in shaping up this conference, inviting people, helping us to contemplate the topics and the messages. My gratitude also goes to hybrid COA from Helsinki. Enormous support and help we have received from Jasna Jelisic, head of the Western Balkan Task Force from External Action Service. I also thank very much to chairs of our panel. I haven't mentioned Amela. Amela, thank you very much for your effort as well. And also to all panelists that helped us to understand a little bit better the topic and the challenges. If we were together in one room physically, which we are unfortunately are not, I would have asked all of you to give a round of applause to Hana Sokolovic, our master of ceremony, for smoothly navigating us through this, and to RCC entire team who is operating invisibly behind the curtain, making sure you are invited and served accordingly. Yorida, Aner, Petra, and Natasha. Of course, our PR team, and of course, Pro Event Company from Sarajevo, which provided us with infrastructure and accommodated us pleasantly in this virtual and even physical space. So at the end, stay safe and healthy. We need all of you more than ever. So we shall overcome this pandemic calamity and hopefully learn some important lessons for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Amer. I will just ask you to take a look at the question which is directed towards you in the Q&A part, and then you can type the answer for our attendee who made the question. What we have came to a lot of times during these 2 days, and what it most often comes to in the end, is the question of education. Education is something that relies on institutions, the media as well, and CSOs. It's one of the things that once again needs all of these three pillars to be involved in order to build resilience of the societies in the Western Balkans. What our speakers said through the panel, some great points are the fact that the traditional media can no longer be traditional because it needs to evolve. We've heard that we need to find new ways of increasing our resilience because obviously the ways that currently exist are not reaching enough people. On the other side, we have learned that it is a lot easier to lie and manipulate, but it is very hard to clean up the mess which is left after what disinformation in different forms, fake news, propaganda, and others leave behind. In the context of crisis, we have seen how the pandemic basically created a space, especially during the lockdown, when our only window to the reality were media and social networks, when people felt so threatened for their lives that they would believe almost anything that was served to them. In these couple of months behind us, we have seen how important it is to have media literacy at high points, to have information literacy at high levels. And it's not only now a question that relates to young people, it's a question that relates to people of all generations, and it is obviously really important to find channels of education towards people of all generations. We have also learned that science is less popular than clickbait, and that traditional media, who can no longer be traditional, needs to find ways to engage, now back to young people, to engage young people in consuming quality content instead of simply relying on what they see in headlines of different news. So a lot of work needs to be done, and it cannot be done definitely by a group of people we have had here in the last 2 days, but it can be initiated by the group of people we have had here the last 2 days. We have heard examples of good practices. Today we have had great presentation from Mr. Toffeson, where we've seen how the system functions and which pillars does it need to have in order to function. And these are examples of good practices, as Amer said, which we need to try and implement in the countries we're facing the problems currently. I will take no longer of your time, and I just want to wish you a nice rest of the day and thank all of you once again for being with us here today, for being with us yesterday, and for being a part of our discussions. Have a nice day and thank you.